The email hit my inbox at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, mandatory all-hands meeting 9 a.m. sharp. No agenda, no preview, no context. In 23 years at Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, I'd learned that meetings without agendas were never about good news. I'm Daniel Kowalski, 55 years old, Director of Plant Operations at Hargrove's flagship manufacturing facility in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. I've been running this plant since before half the current executive team graduated college. My hands have touched every valve, every clean room seal, every batch record system in this building. But something about this morning felt wrong, the way the security guard at the front desk avoided eye contact. The way Linda from HR was already sitting in the auditorium when I walked past at 7:30, a full 90 minutes before the meeting. Linda never arrived early for anything. I grabbed my coffee from the break room, same mug I'd been using for 11 years, the one my daughter Emily had painted for me in middle school with "World's Best Dad" in crooked blue letters. Emily's 22 now, finishing her last year of pharmacy school at UNC Chapel Hill, carrying $87,000 in student loans that I'd promised to help pay off. My wife Karen handles the family budget, and she'd already mapped out the plan. 3 years of aggressive payments once Emily graduated, assuming nothing changed with my salary. The mortgage on our house in Cary had 6 years left, $1,900 a month that hit our account like clockwork on the first of every month. And my mother, Dorothy, 81 years old with early-stage Alzheimer's, was in an assisted living facility that cost $4,200 a month after insurance. I covered half. My sister covered the other half, barely. At 55, you carry these numbers in your head like a second heartbeat. Every financial obligation is a thread holding your life together, and you know exactly what happens if someone cuts even one. The auditorium was packed by 8:55. 340 employees, from the warehouse crew to the quality assurance team, all crammed into fold-out chairs that were never designed for this many people. I noticed two things immediately: a video camera mounted on a tripod near the back wall, and Victor Stanton standing at the podium, adjusting his cufflinks like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Victor had been our CEO for exactly 14 months. He'd come from a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring mid-size pharma companies and optimizing them, which is corporate language for gutting the workforce and flipping the company for profit. Before Victor, Hargrove had been run by the founder's family for 40 years. Good people who understood that making medicine meant caring about the people who made it. Victor understood spreadsheets. That was about it. Standing next to him was his hand-picked VP of operations, a 32-year-old named Craig Jennings. Craig had an MBA from Wharton and the confidence of someone who'd never actually manufactured anything in his life. He'd been shadowing me for 3 months, asking questions that revealed how little he understood about pharmaceutical production. Last week he'd asked me why we couldn't just speed up the sterilization cycle to increase output. I'd explained patiently, because I'd been explaining things patiently to people like Craig for 2 decades, that sterilization cycles are governed by FDA regulations, not production quotas. He'd nodded and typed something into his iPad, and I'd known right then that my explanation hadn't landed. Victor cleared his throat, and the room went quiet. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice amplified through a microphone that made everything sound more important than it was. "As you know, Hargrove is entering an exciting new chapter. Our partnership with Axiom Bio Group represents a $1.2 billion opportunity to transform this company into a global leader in generic pharmaceutical manufacturing. I knew about the Axiom deal. Everyone did. Axiom was a massive generics manufacturer based in New Jersey, and they wanted Hargrove's FDA-approved facilities and our spotless compliance record. The deal had been in negotiations for 8 months, and it was supposed to close in 6 weeks. My compliance systems were a key part of what made Hargrove attractive to Axiom. 23 years of perfect FDA inspection records, 0 warning letters, 0 consent decrees. In an industry where a single compliance failure could shut down a facility and cost hundreds of millions, our track record was gold. To position ourselves for this transition, Victor continued, we've made some difficult but necessary decisions about leadership structure. He paused, doing that thing executives do where they look around the room to create dramatic tension. Effective immediately, Daniel Kowalski is being relieved of his duties as Director of Plant Operations. Craig Jennings will assume full operational responsibility going forward. The silence lasted about 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. I heard someone behind me inhale sharply. I'd started at Hargrove when I was 32, hired by old man Hargrove himself after I'd spent 8 years at Pfizer's manufacturing division in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'd built the compliance infrastructure from scratch, the batch record systems, the environmental monitoring protocols, the deviation management framework, the supplier qualification program. Every FDA inspection we'd passed, every audit we'd aced, every product recall we'd avoided, all of it ran through systems I'd designed, refined, and maintained for over 2 decades. Victor was still talking, something about fresh perspectives and next-generation operational excellence. Craig stood beside him, trying to look humble but failing spectacularly. I set my coffee mug down on the empty chair next to me carefully, because my hands were not going to shake in front of 300 people, and kept my face perfectly still. Around me, I could feel the discomfort radiating off my colleagues like heat from asphalt. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. A few people turned to look at me with expressions that mixed pity with horror, the way you might look at someone who just got hit by a car. Here's what Victor and Craig didn't understand, and what I wasn't about to explain to them in that moment. Pharmaceutical manufacturing isn't software development. You can't just swap out the person running the show and expect the machine to keep humming. The FDA requires something called a site master file, a comprehensive document that describes every aspect of how a facility operates, from water purification to waste disposal to personnel qualifications. That document is the facility's identity as far as regulators are concerned. Mine was 847 pages long, and I'd written every single one of them. But more importantly, I'd built the electronic batch record system that tracked every pill, every capsule, every vial that left our facility. It wasn't an off-the-shelf system. I'd customized it over 15 years, integrating it with our environmental monitoring, our equipment maintenance schedules, our raw material tracking, and our deviation management workflow. The system had my logic embedded in every layer. I didn't just run it, I was the institutional knowledge that made it work. The passwords, the validation protocols, the exception handling procedures that kept production running when things went sideways at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, all of that lived in my head. After the meeting, I walked to my office on the 2nd floor. Same office I'd occupied for 19 years, with the same view of the parking lot and the retention pond where geese gathered every spring. My desk was organized the way it always was, 3 monitors, a stack of batch records awaiting review, a framed photo of Karen and Emily at the beach in Emerald Isle last summer. Emily was laughing in the photo, her hair blowing sideways in the wind, and Karen had that look she gets when she's trying not to cry from happiness. Next to the photo was a small trophy from the FDA, a commissioner's award I'd received 6 years ago for developing an innovative compliance tracking methodology that became an industry model. 12 pharmaceutical companies had adopted my framework. The FDA had literally used my work as an example of best practices. And now I was being replaced by a 32-year-old who didn't know the difference between a Class 3 and Class 4 deviation. Marcus Rivera, my quality assurance manager, appeared in the doorway. Marcus was 44, a solid guy I'd hired 12 years ago when he was fresh out of a rough divorce and needed stability. I'd trained him personally, mentored him, helped him get his ASQ certification. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Dan, this is insane," he said quietly, checking the hallway to make sure no one was listening. They can, I said. And they did. The FDA annual inspection is in 5 weeks. 5 weeks, Dan. Craig doesn't know the first thing about hosting an inspection. He doesn't even know where the environmental monitoring data is stored. I picked up the photo of Karen and Emily and wrapped it in a sheet of printer paper. "That's not my problem anymore, Marcus. You've got a family to think about. 2 kids in travel soccer isn't cheap." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but I shook my head. "Keep your head down. Do your job. And if things get bad, really bad, you have my number." The security escort arrived 2 minutes later. A young guy named Devin who'd started in January and still called me sir every time we crossed paths. He looked more uncomfortable than I did as we walked through the facility one last time, past the clean rooms I'd designed, past the quality lab where I'd spent thousands of hours reviewing test results, past the break room where the maintenance crew was pretending very hard to be interested in the vending machine. At the front door, Devin stopped. "Mr. Kowalski, for what it's worth, everyone here knows this is wrong. Take care of yourself, Devin," I said. And I walked out into the October sunshine, carrying a cardboard box with 23 years of professional life reduced to desk decorations and a coffee mug with crooked blue letters. That first night was the hardest. Karen didn't cry, she's tougher than that, but she got very quiet, which is worse. She pulled up our budget spreadsheet on the kitchen laptop, and we sat at the table doing math that made my stomach turn. My salary had been $142,000. Unemployment would be $505 per week, about $26,000 a year, less than a fifth of what I'd been making. The mortgage, the car payments, Dorothy's assisted living, Emily's loan payments we'd planned to start in June, the numbers didn't work. They didn't come close to working. We have 8 months of savings, Karen said, her voice steady but thin. If we cut everything non-essential, no eating out, cancel the streaming services, postpone the car maintenance, we can stretch it to maybe 10 months. At 55, looking for work in pharmaceutical manufacturing isn't impossible, but it's close. Companies want people who'll stay 20 years, not someone who might retire in 10. They want digital natives who speak the language of AI and automation, not a guy who learned quality systems when batch records were still on paper. I'd be competing against candidates half my age who'd accept 2/3 of my previous salary. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to Karen breathe beside me and thinking about my mother in her assisted living room, not always remembering my name but always smiling when I walked in, thinking about Emily, studying for her pharmacy boards, texting me, "Love you, Dad," every Sunday night like clockwork, thinking about 23 years of 5 a.m. alarms and weekend calls and holiday shifts, all of it evaporating in a 90-second announcement by a man who'd been at the company for 14 months. The first sign of trouble came 9 days later. Marcus called me on a Saturday evening, speaking in the low, careful tone of someone who didn't want to be overheard. "Dan, we have a problem." Craig tried to modify the batch record system to speed up release testing approvals. He said we were leaving money on the table by taking too long to release product. I closed my eyes. Tell me he didn't change the validation parameters. He changed the validation parameters. Did he file a change control? No. In pharmaceutical manufacturing, changing a validated system without filing a change control is like performing surgery without washing your hands. It doesn't just violate procedure, it invalidates every batch produced under the modified system. If the FDA found out, they could declare every product manufactured since the change to be adulterated. That's not a fine, that's a facility shutdown. How many batches went through the modified system? I asked. 14. Over the past 5 days, 3 different products, 14 batches. At roughly $2 million per batch in finished product value, that was $28 million worth of medication sitting in a warehouse, potentially unsaleable, and the FDA inspection was now 4 weeks away. I told Marcus to document everything quietly, carefully, through proper channels. File the deviation report yourself, I said. Make sure it's time-stamped. And Marcus, be careful. Victor doesn't like bad news. The calls from Hargrove started 3 days later. Not from Victor, he was too proud for that, but from the legal department. Jennifer Walsh, general counsel, a woman I'd worked with for 15 years, called at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Daniel, I'm going to be straightforward with you," she said, and I could hear the strain beneath her professional composure. "We need your assistance with some operational matters related to the transition. The company is prepared to offer a consulting arrangement." "Jennifer," I interrupted, "what specifically is the problem?" A long pause. "The batch record system is producing error codes that our team can't resolve. Production has been halted on 2 lines for 72 hours. We're falling behind on orders for 3 major hospital networks." And another pause, longer this time. "The environmental monitoring system flagged an excursion in Cleanroom 4 that we can't clear because the exception handling protocol requires administrative codes that Craig doesn't have." I leaned back in my kitchen chair and looked out the window. A cardinal was sitting on the bird feeder Karen had hung last spring. The bird looked perfectly content, unbothered by the chaos of human institutions. "Jennifer, you terminated me without cause after 23 years. You did it publicly, on camera, in front of every employee at the facility. You replaced me with someone who changed validated systems without change controls and has now potentially adulterated 14 batches of product worth $28 million. And you're calling to ask me to consult?" The silence on her end was excruciating. I could practically hear her legal training fighting with the reality of the situation. "What would it take, Daniel?" "Nothing you're authorized to offer. Give my regards to Victor." I hung up and went back to my coffee. Outside, the cardinal flew away, and I watched it go, thinking about how strange it felt to have no place to be on a Tuesday morning. Within a week, things at Hargrove went from bad to catastrophic. The production halt extended to all 4 manufacturing lines when the batch record system began flagging cascading errors, each one a consequence of Craig's unauthorized modifications rippling through interconnected processes. You change one parameter in a validated system, and it's like pulling a thread on a sweater. Everything unravels, but slowly, so you don't realize how bad it is until you're standing there holding a pile of yarn. Karen showed me the news alert on her phone over dinner. Hargrove Pharmaceuticals had issued a voluntary recall on 2 products, blood pressure medication and a diabetes drug, affecting approximately 180,000 units already distributed to hospitals and pharmacies across 11 states. The stock dropped 19% in a single day. Dan, Karen said carefully, "Are you okay?" I thought about it honestly. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. 23 years of frustration, of being the invisible foundation that everyone stood on but nobody acknowledged. It was all surfacing now, and not because of anything I'd done. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't planted any traps. The system simply couldn't function without the institutional knowledge that had been walking out the door in a cardboard box. Emily called that night. She'd seen the news. "Dad, is that because of what they did to you?" "It's because of choices they made after I left, sweetheart." "Same thing," she said, and the fierce protectiveness in her voice made me smile for the first time in 2 weeks. The FDA inspection arrived on schedule, exactly as I'd warned Marcus it would. Federal inspectors don't reschedule because you're having a bad month. They walked into a facility in chaos, production lines down, batch records full of unexplained errors, a recall in progress, and a director of operations who couldn't answer basic questions about the compliance systems he was supposedly managing. I heard the details later from Marcus, who called me that evening sounding like a man who'd witnessed a car accident. It was a bloodbath, Dan. The lead inspector asked Craig to explain the deviation management workflow, and Craig pulled up a PowerPoint presentation. A PowerPoint. During an FDA inspection, I winced. FDA inspectors don't want presentations. They want raw data, batch records, deviation reports, and straight answers. They want to see that you know your facility intimately, instinctively, the way a surgeon knows anatomy. Showing them a PowerPoint was like bringing a coloring book to a calculus exam. "How many 483 observations?" I asked. "A Form 483 is what the FDA issues when they find violations. 1 or 2 is manageable. More than that is a crisis." 11 483 observations. I'd been through 15 FDA inspections in my career and never received more than 2. This was the kind of result that led to consent decrees, facility shutdowns, and criminal referrals. "Dan, there's more," Marcus said, his voice dropping. During the inspection, the investigators found the unauthorized system modifications. Craig tried to explain them as routine optimization, but the inspector pulled the audit trail and saw there was no change control documentation. They've referred it to the Office of Criminal Investigations. The Office of Criminal Investigations, OCI. The FDA's enforcement arm, the one that puts pharmaceutical executives in prison. This wasn't just a regulatory problem anymore, this was a criminal matter. 3 days after the inspection, my phone rang with a 201 area code. New Jersey. Axiom Biogroup's headquarters. "Mr. Kowalski, my name is Sandra Chen. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Axiom Biogroup." Her voice was calm, professional, the kind of tone that comes from running a $4 billion company. "I'll be direct with you. We've been watching the situation at Hargrove very closely over the past several weeks. Our due diligence team has concluded that the facility's compliance infrastructure was essentially a one-person operation, yours." "I wouldn't say one person," I replied, "because fairness matters, even when you're angry." Marcus Rivera, my QA manager, is excellent. The team I built over 23 years is solid. "Noted," she said, and I could tell she appreciated the honesty. "Here's our situation. The $1.2 billion merger is effectively dead. We can't acquire a facility under FDA criminal investigation with 11,483 observations and an active recall. Our board suspended the deal this morning. I waited, sensing there was more. However," Sandra continued, "Axiom is in the process of expanding our own manufacturing capacity. We're building a new facility in Durham 30 minutes from your home, incidentally, and we need someone to lead the operation from the ground up. Design the systems, hire the team, build the compliance infrastructure, oversee the FDA approval process. Everything you did at Hargrove, but with proper resources and proper respect." "What are we talking about?" specifically, Vice President of Manufacturing Operations, base salary of $245,000, performance bonus up to 30%, full benefits starting day one, and relocation assistance if needed, though it sounds like you wouldn't need that. We'd also cover your daughter's remaining student loan balance as a signing incentive. I sat down. My legs actually went weak, and I'm not a man who admits that easily. Emily's $87,000 in student loans gone, just like that. A salary that would let us pay off the mortgage in 2 years instead of 6. Enough to cover Dorothy's care without my sister having to struggle. Miss Chen. Sandra, why me? You could hire any number of qualified people, because we've done our homework. Your FDA Commissioner's Award, the compliance methodology that 12 companies adopted, 15 inspections without a significant finding. We don't want someone who looks good on paper, Mr. Kowalski. We want the person who built something that actually worked for 23 years and only failed when they removed you from the equation. That tells us everything we need to know about your value. I looked at the photo of Karen and Emily on the kitchen counter. Karen was in the next room, probably recalculating our budget for the 100th time, trying to figure out how to make $505 a week cover a life that costs $9,000 a month. When would you need an answer? Take your time. But Daniel, one thing I want you to know. At Axiom, we don't fire people who build things that work. We promote them. I called Karen into the kitchen and told her everything. She listened with her arms crossed, the way she does when she's processing something big. When I finished, she uncrossed her arms, walked over to me, and put her hands on my face. You deserve this, she said. Every single bit of it. The investigation into Hargrove expanded over the following months. The FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, working alongside the Department of Justice, uncovered a pattern of compliance shortcuts that went far beyond Craig's unauthorized modifications. Victor Stanton, it turned out, had been pressuring the quality team to accelerate product releases to inflate revenue numbers ahead of the Axiom merger. Documents showed he'd personally directed the QA team to skip stability testing requirements on 3 products, a direct violation of federal law that put patients at risk. I learned about the details from a DOJ attorney named Robert Huang, who contacted me as a potential witness and technical consultant. He offered $200 an hour for my expertise in interpreting the batch records and compliance data. I spent 4 full days at the federal building in Raleigh, walking investigators through every system I'd built, explaining what the data showed and what it meant. It wasn't complicated, not really. The systems had done exactly what I'd designed them to do. They'd recorded everything. Every shortcut, every bypass, every deviation from protocol was time-stamped, logged, and preserved in the electronic records. Victor and Craig had treated those records like an inconvenience. They were actually evidence. Marcus testified too. He'd followed my advice, documented everything through proper channels, filed deviation reports with timestamps, preserved the audit trails. His testimony corroborated the electronic evidence perfectly. When it was over, the DOJ attorney shook his hand and told him his diligence had likely prevented contaminated medication from reaching patients. Marcus called me that night, and for the first time in 20 years of working together, I heard him choke up. Victor Stanton was indicted on 12 counts of fraud and regulatory violations. Craig Jennings was charged as a co-conspirator. The trial lasted 3 weeks and ended with convictions on all counts. Victor received 6 years in federal prison. Craig got 3 years and permanent debarment from the pharmaceutical industry. The judge specifically cited the reckless disregard for patient safety and regulatory integrity demonstrated by their actions. Hargrove Pharmaceuticals didn't survive. The consent decree the FDA imposed was too severe mandatory third-party oversight of all operations, production limitations, massive fines, combined with the recall costs, legal fees, and the evaporated merger. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 340 people lost their jobs, and that was the part that kept me up at night. I hadn't wanted that. Those were my people, the maintenance techs who'd worked weekend shifts to keep the lines running, the quality analysts who'd caught problems at 3 a.m., the warehouse crew who handled product with the care it deserved. I hired as many of them as I could. When I started at Axiom's New Durham facility, one of the first things I did was pull up the Hargrove employee roster and start making calls. Marcus came first. I made him my director of quality. Devin, the young security guard who'd called me sir, got a facilities position. Over the next 6 months, I brought in 22 former Hargrove employees. Every one of them someone I trusted and knew could do the job. Sandra Chen noticed. You're building a family over there, not just a team, she said during a quarterly review. In my experience, I told her, that's the same thing. The Axiom facility passed its pre-approval inspection with 0 observations, something the lead inspector told me she'd never seen before for a brand new facility. Sandra called me personally with the news, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. That evening, I took Karen out to dinner for the first time in months. Real dinner, not fast food or leftovers, at the Italian place in downtown Durham where we'd had our first date 30 years ago. Emily graduated from pharmacy school that spring, debt-free. When she walked across the stage, Karen grabbed my hand, so tight I thought she'd break my fingers. Emily found us in the crowd afterward, still in her cap and gown, and threw her arms around me. "You know what I'm most proud of, Dad?" she said into my shoulder. "Not the degree. The fact that you never compromised. Not once." I drove over to see my mother that weekend. Dorothy was having a good day. She knew my name, asked about Karen, remembered that Emily was in school. When I told her about the new job, about the facility, about Emily's graduation, she reached over and patted my hand the way she used to when I was a kid and brought home a good report card. "Your father would be proud," she said. "He always said you were the steady one." Dad had worked 35 years at the General Motors plant in Flint before it closed. He'd understood something about work that guys like Victor Stanton never will, that the people who build things, who maintain things, who show up every day and make sure the systems run, they're not overhead. They're the whole point. The house in Cary was paid off by November. I set up a college fund for any future grandchildren, increased my contribution to Dorothy's care so my sister could finally breathe, and started putting real money into retirement for the first time in years. At 56, I was earning more than I ever had, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people I trusted. Axiom had already talked about expanding the Durham facility and potentially building a second site in the Research Triangle. If that happened, they'd need someone to lead the whole manufacturing division. Last month, I was cleaning out the hall closet and found the cardboard box from my last day at Hargrove. The coffee mug was still inside, wrapped in printer paper, "World's Best Dad" in crooked blue letters, a little faded now. I washed it out and brought it to my new office. It sits on my desk next to my FDA Commissioner's Award and a new photo, Emily, in her pharmacist's white coat, standing next to Karen and me at her graduation. Sometimes I think about that Tuesday morning meeting, about Victor's practice speech and Craig's eager face, about the way 300 people went silent when my name was called. I think about walking past colleagues who couldn't meet my eyes, about Devin holding the door, about driving home with a cardboard box on the passenger seat and no idea what came next. And then I think about what came next, how the systems I built, not with cleverness or sabotage, but with simple, stubborn integrity, told the truth when the people in charge wouldn't. How the same compliance infrastructure that everyone took for granted became the evidence trail that held criminals accountable and protected patients from harm. How losing everything I'd built at Hargrove gave me the chance to build something better somewhere else. Karen says I'm different now. More present, she calls it. I come home at a reasonable hour. I grill steaks on weeknights. I call Emily just to talk, not because I need anything. I visit my mother on Saturdays instead of catching up on batch records. For the first time since I can remember, work is something I do, not something I am. At 55, getting fired felt like the end of everything. At 56, I understand it was the beginning of what should have been there all along, a career where experience is valued, integrity isn't negotiable, and the people who build things are treated like they matter, because they do. We always did. And here's the thing about building systems with integrity at their foundation. They work, not just in manufacturing, not just in compliance. In life, you spend 23 years doing things the right way, and when everything falls apart, the right way is what saves you. Not schemes, not revenge, not clever positioning, just the accumulated weight of doing your job honestly, every single day, until the truth becomes undeniable. The mug on my desk is faded, but I can still read it. World's Best Dad. My daughter painted it when she was 11. She's a pharmacist now, helping people, because her father showed her that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. That's the only legacy I ever wanted to leave, and no quarterly update meeting, no matter how many cameras they set up, can take that away.